September 1943. Rome is now under Nazi occupation. First order of business, rid the Italian capital of Jews. Thousands scramble for a place to hide, which lead many into the doors of a Catholic hospital under the care of 3 doctors who risk their lives to protect them. The doctors took an oath to preserve life. They saw this as their duty, no matter the cost, knowing what their fate might be. Armed with stethoscopes, charts, and the grace of God, these doctors conspired to fool the Nazis with a deadly, contagious, fake disease. They called it Syndrome K.
I'm Stephen Edwards, and the project is called Syndrome K, and I'm the producer, director, and also the composer. So that's
everything, all the things.
My little role in that one.
Is it weird to say that I'm excited to talk to you about this topic? It's always weird when we jump into things that are more of the serious tone, but those types of documentaries and films and subject matters really get me excited because I think they're the things we need to talk about.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, my story is a story about people being great and being great human beings in the face of humans being their worst that they've ever been in recorded history, you know, maybe a couple other instances. You know, the people at being their best at the time when people were being their very worst.
Well, I appreciate your time today, and my viewers and listeners know that when I jump into something like World War II in that history, I get very excited. And this is something, I think when you get into World War II, you get into the Holocaust, there are so many stories that sometimes it gets a little overwhelming thinking that you may know everything, and then you stumble across something. And I had no idea that this even happened. So let's jump into the story and how you found it and why you decided to highlight this.
Well, I mean, it's funny, you know, you say you hadn't heard it. Well, you know, we actually went to Rome and interviewed people about this story, and people that had elders that had lived their entire lives and going back many generations, we ran into in the Jewish ghetto in Rome, and they had never heard the story. So this is really a secret story that's now getting out because of this film. And it's the story of 3 doctors who made up a fake disease that saved Roman Jews from deportation to Auschwitz during the Nazi occupation of Rome. So it's kind of remarkable, and you know, there's a lot of reasons the story didn't get out. I think it was mainly the 3 doctors who just were these sort of humble guys that did what they thought they had to do and put the hospital staff and their lives into great jeopardy. And then when the Allies took Rome back in June of '44, you know, they just went about their lives, went back to their practices, and didn't crow about it, really. I mean, there's only one interview with one of the doctors that even exists. And I was lucky enough to interview Dr. Ozacchini, who was 98 years old when I sat him down, and still full of life. You know?
You did everything with this film. I mean, there was a lot that went into it, but you directed it, you produced it. When I sat down to watch it, and I watched it a couple of times because I feel like if you don't, you're so just flabbergasted a little bit by the story in the beginning that you're trying to take it all in, and so then you need to watch it again to actually absorb the information that you're getting, because it does sound like a made for Hollywood story, right? Like, let's sit down, let's pitch this. Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be in it. We've got 3 doctors, they make up this story. You know, it sounds so crazy, but you're right, it was exactly what they needed to do, and they couldn't talk about it because it was life or death. Like, you're harboring a whole bunch of basically fugitives from the law in this hospital that is still a working hospital. and you make up a disease that doesn't even exist, and then you have to make sure that people think that it's a disease.
Yeah, and you have to cover it with charts. I mean, think about it. The doctors were fighting against the most fierce, unit ever assembled by mankind, the SS. And there was 1,500 SS troops inside the city walls of Rome, which is like downtown Seattle. I mean, it's tiny. It's not that big. Really, I mean, the real downtown is really not that big. And, their weapons were stethoscopes and medical charts, and the SS weapons was, everything else that they had already liberally used all across Europe and caused unbelievable amounts of death and destruction and despair and all of it. And there's an anecdote, but I didn't put the anecdote in my film, but it's a story of, Rome got really bad during the occupation. Everybody was hungry. It was super desperate. It was just a bad scene. And these 10 Roman mothers broke into an SS bakery and stole wheat, flour, all the stuff that needed to make bread, and took it home. And the SS caught all 10 of them, lined them up on the Tiber, and machine gunned them. So, it's an atrocity amongst atrocities, but
they just didn't care.
They didn't care. And, if they had caught the hospital in the midst of this, goings on, they would have probably executed the doctors, probably executed some of the nurses, and certainly wheeled off all the Jews. There's no question.
Yeah.
So the looming threat was, I'm sure, unbelievable. And they did it anyway. Yeah, it's just so amazing. I mean, talk about heroes, like meeting Dr. Ozacchini. There's a picture of me with Dr. Ozacchini. That's like meeting a real true blue, hero in the truest sense of hero. I've met a few in my life, but he's definitely the star of anybody I've ever met.
Well, I think if you haven't spent a lot of time really looking into what World War II was to people, and what it meant to defy what was happening around you, is if you get caught, and this was, a lot of stories, if you get caught going against the SS during that time, it's not just you that gets punished, it's your entire family. It's, it's almost like, a mob. We're going to hurt you, we're going to hurt the people you love, and we're going to hurt your community. And, you talked about the community being so small, and I think when you think of the Vatican and being around Vatican City, you kind of think it's a little more safe because, during that time, they accidentally bombed Vatican City, but they, a small section of it, but it was never supposed to be bombed because it was kind of this place that was untouchable, right?
Right.
And then, but everything around it was just being demolished.
Yep.
And so but I think in your mind, when you're a small town and you're a community and you're around something that's so much bigger than yourself, like Vatican City, you think you might be a little bit safe, and they absolutely weren't. And during that time, and you have footage. Yeah, you're not.
Think about it. Vatican City is like an 18-hole golf course. You can walk around the whole country in 5 minutes, right? And the Pope had no army. Like, there's nothing. The SS drew a white line around Vatican City that's still there. They left it. Wow. Yeah, if you go to Vatican City, you will cross a white line to get into it. They left it there on purpose just to show what they were able to fight against. But yeah, I mean, what's the Pope going to do? Get a bunch of Carmelite nuns and give them carbine rifles? Like, no,
it's not going to happen.
No,
it's not. I visualized that, but no, it's not going to happen.
No.
But you have footage. What's so unique about this documentary is that you have so much different footage. You have footage of, interviews with different survivors at the time, and you have footage of the Pope at the time that is meeting with Hitler, because when you're, and a lot of people probably have opinions on that shouldn't happen. But again, this is a life or death situation. And, Vatican wants to stay being the Vatican, and you have to do what you have to do when you're a diplomat. And that's basically, during times like that, the Pope is a diplomat. The Pope is trying to make sure that his people don't die. And so all of that's happening. And then you've got this small hospital that's in the middle of all of that. And there was this one scene that I loved when, there maybe had gotten wind that there was something not going right there. And there are two there are two vehicles that are on their way there to like check out and see what's going on. And so you do like this map of these vehicles and they're getting derailed, right? Like what in the world would cause these two men that are on their way there, these vehicles, to basically raid the hospital to like give them 30 more minutes to get prepared. Like, and I just felt that angst as you're watching that scene. You're like, oh my gosh, get whatever you need to get done. So you have live video, you have these interviews, you have animation, you have all of this different medium going on to make us feel the urgency of the situation. What was your thought process in putting all of these different mediums together? Why was it important to you? Because some people just show footage, some people just do interviews, but you've got everything happening.
It's a great question. I mean, really the story, when I discovered the story, I discovered it on Facebook, and somebody put a meme on Facebook about Syndrome K. And so what I did was I was like, oh man, this is such a great story, because I'm also a citizen of Italy. I also made another documentary in Rome in 2017. So I was, keenly interested. So the first thing I did was I went to Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. I said, this documentary has been made. There's somebody made this doc. I want to watch it because I'm so fascinated. I couldn't find it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, again, talk about the greatest elevator pitch in Hollywood. 3 doctors make up a fake disease, fool the SS, save Jews. Like, I mean, those stories are gold. So anyway, so I found the story, and then, within a minute or two, I decided I'm going to make this film somehow. And then I started looking into, okay, where are we going to find the footage? And, the Italians, when the Germans were occupying Rome, weren't going around with, movie cameras, shooting film of the SS. I mean, there's a little bit of SS footage or German footage, which I found. And the rest of it, either we had to recreate or we used some from a famous movie called Rome Open City that was shot in 1946. Roberto Rossellini, Isabella Rossellini's dad, which was sort of the first big Italian film here in the States. And so we had, and then also what came up huge for us was, if you're familiar with the Shoah Foundation was created by Spielberg after Schindler's List. And basically they went around and captured 55,000 testimonials of Holocaust survivors all over Europe, every corner of Europe, everywhere, including Rome. So one day, this camera crew in around 2000 went to Rome and they found Dr. Sacerdoti and interviewed him,
oh my gosh,
which was absolute panning for gold and finding a nugget this big, right? I mean, there is no film without Shoah, right? And then they found 3 survivors. The cool thing was, we had all this footage. We had like an hour and a half interview with Sacerdoti. He finishes talking and then he fumbles with his microphone, takes it off. And then Leah Danola, who was one of the survivors, walks in and sits down at the same couch with that Sacerdoti was interviewed, and they start her interview, right? So they were probably sitting around, eating pasta and drinking Brunello. And these guys came in and said, all right, you come into my house at this time. And so that's kind of how, they stayed close. And this is, 55 years after World War II, they were still hanging out. It's his cousin that he saved. So like Shoah was, and then the other cool thing was there was a guy called Crispin at Shoah, and I said, hey, do you have any stuff about Syndrome K, Fate Bene Fratelli Hospital? Like really obscure requests. And they tagged the interviews. So Mr. Sonino, who was just in there for a minute, his interview was tagged and said he was friends with Dr. Sacerdoti. So we found that clip and used it, and they gave it to us, basically. So yeah, it was pretty remarkable. So, this movie is the ultimate collage of, we pulled from anywhere we could get it. And if we couldn't get it, we recreated it, is basically the short answer.
And you have Ray Liotta as the narrator of this. What made you choose Ray? And then, having it be one of his last projects is also, it just gives me chills because of what it's all connected to and how it all works out. But was it hard to get him? What made you decide to use Ray?
So it's a great story. So Ray's daughter, Carson, and my daughter, Bella, went K through 8 and 9 through 12 together. So, and they're still friends. And so I would see Ray at the Christmas sings and stuff, right? at school. And I was from kindergarten, believe me, I was already a huge fan of Ray, Goodfellas. I mean, so many films, that I loved him in. So it's just like, hi, how are you? Great to meet you. And so this came up, and I sent Ray an email. I said, hey, Ray, Steve Edwards, Bella's dad. I'm doing this doc called Syndrome K. Would you possibly be interested in being our narrator? And so I sent it to his phone. It turns out he was in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival watching one of his films, and Carson was sitting next to him. And he reads this email, and he goes, Carson, who's Steve Edwards? Who's Bella Edwards? What is this? And she goes, oh my God, Bella, I've been friends with Bella since then. I'm sure she elbowed him, guilted him into doing it. And he said, of course, I'd love to do it. Right. And so he came in sitting exactly where I'm sitting right now into my studio.
Oh my gosh.
And he was just the greatest. I mean, he's such a joy to work with, super funny, profane, and it's funny because, my editor, Greg Hunter, and my writer, Greg Ballard, and we got together an hour before Ray came over, and we just watched the first half hour of Goodfellas, which is probably one of my favorite cinematic narrations of all time. Maybe Shawshank Redemption, Morgan Freeman. There's a few others, no question, top 3 or 4 ever. And so we watched this beginning. We're just looking at each other. We're going, I can't believe Ray Liotta is going to come in and do our little homemade movie, that we did for literally nothing. And we just kind of pinched ourselves, and it was just a joy, and and we were so sorry to lose him. It was just, he had so much ahead of him.
Yeah.
We were just it just really took, everybody was in shock, and so grateful to have had the chance to spend a day with him. And, he's really he's our tour guide for this movie. He's the person that walks us through it and takes our hand. And, he's the constant voice of the film, and it would be a very different film without him. So,
I think it really fits well with everything that you've got going on, the pacing of the movie, because, it is such an important content matter, right? And so you want people to be entertained enough to pay attention, right? So that they can take something from it and have the discussions that they want to have after. But
and to your point, which is so great, I read an interview with Michael Moore, and I've been a fan of Michael Moore since Roger and Me. And he did an interview, and they said, what do you have to do to make a documentary? And he had a list of a bunch of things. And one of the things he said is the movie has to be entertaining. You're making a movie, and you're going toe to toe with the greatest filmmakers. Your film's getting put out there, and so is everybody else's on the same level playing field, right? So it has to be entertaining, right? Is to your point. Anyway, I thought.
Having it be entertaining, but having, fitting in all of the information that you need to get in there in an entertaining way, because there is a lot to take in. Like there were times that, of course, when I'm going to do an interview, I want to write some notes down, but that's why I love when I can watch something twice, because I just watch it the first time and I try and absorb everything that you can absorb. And I was just like, what? What? This happened? And
that's the same way I was, by the way.
People aren't talking about this everywhere, and that's why I think I loved it even more, because like you said, is these doctors did what they felt they had to do, no questions asked. And then they went on about their lives when they were done with it. It wasn't like, look at the cool things I did. It was, this was the right thing to do. The right thing to do is that we have this facility. We could possibly fit, I don't know how many people in here. Let's try and do it, and it was dangerous. It was very dangerous. And, on top of that, you're showing the area at the time in Rome, when you've got a war like that goes through there. There was so much famine. These people are starving. And there's a moment that just, took my breath away, visually and with the narration going on, where you would have horses that would go down, and the people just, the minute that they could, came out of it, just kind of came out of nowhere, cut all the meat off these horses and went back into their hiding areas, because that's what they had to do. And any other day, there's no way they would think about doing something like that. But it shows how desperate the situation was. And even at the end of the film, still not knowing how many people were saved in that hospital, because they had to keep records so that they didn't get caught, but at the same time, you're getting people in and out and in and out. And it's thousands could have gone through there.
Yeah, and we found out there was actually a second hospital in Rome doing it as well. We never found any survivors, but one of the survivors told us this other hospital was doing it too. So we don't know how many people, and some people would stay for 4 days and then there's a lot of shuffling going on, a lot of fake papers. It was the clandestine operation that just worked to the T, Brilliant.
I would have to say that you fell upon something and how everything kind of came together. I like the story that we got the story, like your story of just getting everything to tell the story that you wanted to tell. It all kind of happened, on purpose, but on accident at the same time, which I think is kind of what happened in this story as well. Sure. It was crossing your fingers and hoping, and then it all just came out. And I believe this is already streaming in a lot of places, right? You can see this everywhere.
Yeah, Apple, like iTunes, Apple Music, Google Movies, Amazon, DirecTV, a bunch of other ones.
I will make sure that I put all of the links below in the video so that you can capture this. So this, I have to say that I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch this again with my husband and my dad, because I just feel like even if you're not into learning what happened in the world during World War II, this is one of those stories that just captivates you. And I'm still just in awe, like how, that you found it on Facebook for one, and then you did your due diligence
in Los Angeles.
Like, this actually happened, right?
Right. I'm a composer in Los Angeles, and I find the story like nobody else. Like, filmmakers are looking for stories all the time. That's like that's the gold standard of our business, is find a good story, then try to make it. Right. And by the way, no small irony that I made a film about a fake disease in the middle of a pandemic. Right.
I mean, seriously.
Come on, like you can't make that up. And then we're making a movie version of this too, by the way, a narrative.
Oh, I'm very excited. I definitely want to know about that.
Okay, we'll keep you posted.
Again, this is something that there needs to be more people talking about this. Syndrome K, again, it is out on digital. I will make sure I put all the links below. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed hearing about everything. Stephen, you're amazing. And I can't wait to see more from you. So I hope there are more projects that you just accidentally find in the future.
Exactly. Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great being with you.